There's nothing in the endeavors of humankind that has been a boon as much as science and technology. Some people won't agree with that, but I believe that people are advanced in their standard of living and in their ability to grow more food and their ability to live longer lives and be comfortable and happy as a result of science more than any other factor in human endeavors. And a lot of people don't agree with that. There's a lot of people who think that beer may be the best thing, and then there's a lot of many people who say, "Oh, what about religion?" But science, I think, has really improved mankind's lot in the world. There was a period of time when science didn't exist, a long period of time where science didn't exist, and I'm talking about from about 500,000 years ago, if you buy into that as the length of time when human beings existed. And then about 100,000 years ago, they domesticated dogs, and then something like 2,500 years ago, they really began to codify science for a little while. With in Greece, for example, with you know Aristotle and those guys, they defined the scientific method and wrote it down and had written records of the things that they observed. And then there was a period, of about 1,000 years that we could call the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, they call it, where science was ignored again. And then somewhere around 1492, thereabouts, they began doing science again as a regular exercise and enterprise in which they codified the scientific method very carefully. With Francis Bacon and all those folks, and there was Copernicus and Galileo and Leonardo, of course, and people like that. They came up with this method of observation of the natural world, and with it, there was no more, the superstitions would not stand up. It Then there's the other thing, technology. Technology is the applied sciences, and technology and science feed off of each other. The improvement in science, the discovery in science leads to technological discoveries. So, electricity as a force, when they had Faraday and all that, study it scientifically, led to the development of the generator, which led to the development of all the electricity that we see around us, which improved the ability to study electricity even better, so that they had ohm meters and so forth like that. And over the course of it kind of like one feeds into the other, science into technology, technology into science. Now, back around 600 BC to 300 BC, there was a period of scientific discovery, and then they carried some of it through into the Roman times. But then there was that period of Dark Ages where they decided that the scientific method was something of a, I don't know, they just didn't teach it for whatever reasons. And it fell out of favor, but it still existed within like a small segment of society. And they kept the books of Aristotle and so forth. Then when they started studying it again, there was a backlash against science, like, for example, what happened to Galileo and so forth. He was not allowed to expand on his science because they said that it was in opposition to church beliefs. And then eventually, though, the benefits of science became so obvious that the church had to back down. What we're seeing right now, unfortunately, here in the United States is, I don't know how powerful of a movement it is, but there seems to be this anti-science movement that's going on in the world today. It comes about in like three ways that I can define. But the one is really obvious. there are certain individuals who, if I can classify them, they're religious. They're fundamentalist Christians, a lot of them, and they feel that science is contrary to reality. And what they've done is they've set up a false equivalency here. They try to tell you that science is part of another religion. They say that, they call it secularism, they like to call it. So the problem is that the secularism, as they return to it as a religion, is actually not a religion. Because whether you want to believe this or not, don't have to, but there's no faith involved in science. There's when I say something about scientific, like gravity, all objects of mass attract each other proportionate upon their size and the distance between them. When I say that, that's an observation that somebody made, which has been pretty much backed up by every one of the experimental observations ever since then. But it's not based on belief, it's based on evidence. The same thing can be said, with a more controversial thing like, let's say, evolution, which a lot of the people in this anti-science movement don't like. People who believe in evolution, they're just saying believe in evolution. It's not really a belief. It's a conclusion based upon the evidence. And if there were a bunch of new evidence that showed up, which were conclusively in opposition to the evidence that already exists, then they would throw the evolutionary theory overboard. You can prove it wrong. It can be proven wrong with an empirical observation, but it has not been proven wrong. There's no real observable evidence that can prove it wrong. The same thing goes with global warming, which is probably even more controversial. That is to say, what scientists like to refer to it as global climate change. See, I'm not a scientist. And that is an indication that we have, over the last 30 years or so, been experiencing a different change, a different type of environment in the weather, where it's getting a little bit warmer on the average, and we've seen the warmest years on record have all occurred within the last 20 years, and so forth and so on. And part of the theory is that this is caused by the greenhouse effect, which is made from burning too many fossil fuels. That may be, possibly true. And a lot of scientists say that may be possibly true because since we now have 6 trillion people on the earth burning fossil fuels, it's a lot more fossil fuels going up into space. But it may also be a part of some kind of a cycle that we don't understand completely either. But there is evidence that shows that there has been a warming trend in the last many years. So, but what we're seeing here is that there's people that don't believe in science, and they come right out and say that science is a religion, which is, just, in other words, they're setting up a false equivalency. So if I have a religion that says that the Earth is only 5,000 years old, and you have a religion that's science that says that it's 2 billion years old, well, your religion and my religion are both religions, and they're both more, you believe what you believe, and I believe what I believe, and we both have an equal claim to our opinion. Well, all right, anybody can say anything they want and believe anything they want. It's a free country, but if you're going to reap the benefits of all of these scientific discoveries, then you can't go attacking science. Somebody who's flying from New York to Los Angeles in an airplane, in a jet plane, is going to have to jump out the window and say, this isn't possible. Science made this happen, and jump out the window and smash themselves into the ground. Or if you're chatting on your cell phone and you're telling your buddy on your cell phone, oh, science is a religion. It doesn't have any realistic, it's not real. It's just a fantasy belief of some people. Well, if that's what you think, then put down the cell phone because what do you think? There's little men inside your cell phone who run their spiritual through the spiritual plane to the others? No, science found the radio waves and the science made the electronics that are inside that cell phone that you use. Now I know there are some religions that up the road, the Amish, who actually practice what they preach there. They act like they're living in 1842 and all this scientific stuff is ridiculous. But how do you deny that science works? Well, anyway, that's one thing. If you don't want to accept science, that's fine. Keep it to yourself. There's a lot of crazy ideas out there, and every once in a while, one of the crazy ideas could actually be true. But I also wanted to say that then there's the second wave of these anti-science people, which are their way of looking at it is that this you see this in global warming a lot, is that somehow the scientists are politically motivated. And, maybe some scientists are politically motivated, but over the course of many years, when you publish into scientific journals and there's peer review, and if you have some breakthrough that you ran through an experiment and it's published in a journal and everybody in your field reads it and then they run the experiment, if you're only acting upon something that is political, it's not going to make that reality work. It may or it may not, but it's not going to make it work if you just want it to be true. It has to stand up to experimentation and repeated experimentation. You can't just want it to be true politically and then make it happen. So those folks who attack the global warming on that way they're off the mark there. Then there are the third wave of this anti-science movement is this effort by people on the right wing to stop funding science. They have a couple reasons that they are not funding science. First, they're following those religious people who say that science is just a religion and doesn't have any credibility, therefore we shouldn't be using government money to fund the religion. That's the logic. In other words, science hasn't done us any good so far, and any more than my religion, which is I hold snakes and because it says to do so in the Bible or something. That religion should be just as funded as any other religion, including science, they say. I mean, that's kind of what they're going in that direction. But they also say, oh, a lot of these scientists are commies. They're anti-industrialists. That's why that's why they're preaching global warming, because they want to destroy the free market society, which is the industrial world and so forth. I don't know if they really believe that, but there are people preaching that. In other words, we shouldn't be funding scientific research unless it's scientific research that we agree with. Well, one of the problems with that way of thinking is that when you're doing research, you're discovering something that you don't already know. That's what research does a lot of times. Like the invention of penicillin. The guy was going through petri dishes, Fleming, I think his name was going through petri dishes and observed that this one mold, this one bacteria had some kind of substance around it that kept the bacteria away from that area. And he said, oh, that's interesting. He didn't anticipate that prior to doing that research. He was just making an observation that was an observation to be made. And it's the same thing with all funding of all science. You can't always have a idea in advance of where something is going to go. So it's very counterproductive to try to fund something to go in any direction for sure. Well, anyway, that's what I have to say today. Stop it.